Share via email. Report story. By Kate 7H. Chapter 1. The Prologue. Walking back from the main campus to the dorms had become so second nature to Ochako, she could probably do it with her eyes closed. She tucked a lock of wet hair behind her ear, still feeling damp after swimming with Suyu in the pool. Suyu had specially permission to use the pool for training outside of school time every other week, and had invited Ochako to come along. Thus the evening doubled as fun and as training. Ochako had been trying to see if she could be able to float water. But the mechanics of it were tricky. She'd been able to float small portions of it, but touching water was a concept she hadn't thought too much about before. The endeavor had tired her out far more than expected, so she left early and now she walked alone to the dorms in her gym clothes, ready to take a proper shower and curl up in her pajamas. She blew out a breath, feeling the exertion from the complicated use of her quirk manifesting itself as a headache, and mild pressure in her ears made them feel like they needed to pop. She would love to just go to sleep, but there were still class assignments she needed to work on. Spring term finals were also coming up in a few weeks, so she wanted to get a head start on that too. Being ranked 12 or 13 consistently through her first year was not acceptable. After all, she'd already vowed that year 2 was going to be where she pulled ahead. No more nonsense. As she walked up to the dorm building, she paused, seeing Izuku sitting at a table with Iida and Todoroki through the lit windows. Speaking of nonsense, she thought at the familiar swarm of butterflies in her stomach. Ochako knew that she had in small portions distanced herself from Izuku since their first finals at UA, and since Aoyama's words to her then. It wasn't on purpose, from what she was aware of, and it wasn't like she was avoiding him, but still it happened. He'd been getting closer with others in the class, namely Iida and Todoroki, especially after their run-in with the hero killer. Because of that, she didn't think he noticed her slight absence all that much, as she'd been getting closer with the girls of the class as well. Part of her tried not to be too hurt that he didn't notice. She knew what his position was. He hadn't had a lot of friends before high school, and was bullied for much of that time as well. He wasn't used to having friends, so he was surely appreciating the friendships he'd been able to make in their class. It wasn't his fault she'd pulled away from him, that was just how she'd had to cope at times. Their wilderness survival training had changed all of that. Now he was almost hyper-aware of her whenever she was around him, since they'd shared their own, traumatic bonding experience. He sought her out and brought her into his growing group of close friends, so now both she and Suyu, and sometimes Momo too, would train, eat, and go outside of campus together with them quite frequently. The image of Izuku knocking on her door with a bright smile and a proposition was starting to be a familiar sight. She wasn't going to say it was unpleasant, far from it. It was delightful to have so much attention, and to spend so much time with him. It was just distracting, as studying with him meant feeling hyper-aware of their closeness as he jots something down in her notebook to help her understand, and she can't help but just look at him, his words about logarithms going straight over her head. And that couldn't be helping her goal to do better academically. I decided, didn't I? Ochako thought, shaking her head as she gripped the door handle. I'm not
How you doing?
going to feel these things anymore. And yet, he was making that quite difficult. Promoted stories. You'll also like Izuku's Harem Academia 190K 1.8 Cust. Read. Much needed love Yandere Succubus Momo X Izu. 51.9K 826 after Wattpad. Had decided to delete this story out of nowhere. I and many reader were distraught. So I'm making a remake of the story from the ground up to compensate. Hurt cuz I love you to death Izuocha. Ha. 8.9K 141 Class 1A is now Class 2A and is working to be better heroes due to events that had happened before. Deku has gotten strong feelings toward Uraraka during the summer as feelings. Aizawa. X-Reader 57.3K 1.3K RE posting. This until I edit it, sorry if it's not good, it's my first time writing a story. You enroll at UA and you have multiple quirks you are really good at using, why? Not all heroes wear capes. Some just have 8.43K 1.4 kilo. Everybody. This is a suicidal, depressed Deku book with Dadmik. Will their bond grow? Will Mike fuck up? Will Izuku try to kill himself? Find out yourself. Number 1 Radio. Zero Deku Oni shots 31.5K 798 because of circumstances, this book won't be continued unfortunately. Feel free to check out my other stuff. Thank you for understanding. After all, Omfluke 11.4K 802. Will edit once I'm free. N. This is a work of fiction, and any similarity with other works is purely coincidental. Excuse grammatical errors and misspellings, Eng. On top of all of that, he wasn't afraid of being in her space anymore. Which meant she was having to deal with being around him and casual touches too. She figured that his comfort with her must have come with how physically close they'd been during the training. I mean, we were sleeping together the whole time. She thought, her face heating up more than it already was. That kind of forced him to be more comfortable around me. Just that morning, he'd come up behind her and laid his hand on her shoulder when she hadn't heard him. She was sure he was gonna give her a heart attack at this point, and since when have I been more flustered than him? Still, despite all the closeness they'd gotten with each other, she was going to hold herself to the promise she'd made. She was not going to seek out a romance with him. That didn't mean they couldn't be friends though. Of course not. Ochako steeled herself and opened the door, figuring she'd stalled enough at the door. Besides, it was cold and her hair was wet. It looked like the group was alone in the common area, so the sound of the door opening caught all three's attention. Hi, she replied as they greeted her. Uraraka, did Asui not come back with you? Iida asked, noticing that she was alone. Nah, Ochako replied, walking up to their table. I was trying to train my quirk and it took a lot out of me. She just wanted to train longer, so I came back. You okay? Izuku said, concern in his voice. She shoved back those butterflies once more. Yeah, I was just gonna go dry my hair. You should you should do that quickly. You wouldn't want to catch cold, Iida said emphatically. Ochako looked up and nodded happily to him, lifting her backpack over her shoulder once more. Will do. When you're done with that, you're welcome to come study with us, Izuku added as she stepped away. She felt her cheeks warm, but she turned with a bright smile. Smile. Sure. I'll be right back. See ya in a bit. Izuku smiled so bright in return, he looked almost like a sun shining, and Ochako half wondered how she wasn't being melted. She took a step back, nearly tripping on a chair behind her. She tried to not to let her embarrassment show until she was already nearing the elevators. With her heart in her throat, she covered her face as she clicked the button for the fourth floor. Oh boy. Chapter 2. Ochako stepped through the train doors, feeling a lightness come over as she took in the familiar sight. It was bright from the springtime sun, warmer now as they approached summer. The trees swayed in the breeze, the sound of their leaves rustling was just as familiar as the sound of the train. She didn't live in a small town per se, but it was smaller than the Musudafu district in Tokyo. There was less hustle and bustle, which was a nice relief every once in a while. She tugged on the straps of her backpack, setting off through the streets she'd known since she was a child. As she walked alone, her mind wandered, thinking on the past few weeks. This was really one of the first times she'd been alone for a while. Sure, living in the dorms was fun, but she sometimes missed her personal space, the quiet of coming home to an empty house and eagerly waiting until her family came home from their jobs. In the dorms, there were people constantly in and out of the common areas, and even if she was in her room alone, there were often knocks on her door with requests to do this or that. It wasn't that disliked it, she loved spending time with so many friends, it was just nice to have a break from it all too. Ochako blew out a sigh of defeat as her mind settled on core of the problem, his cute, freckle-spattered smile filling her thoughts. Izuku was so busy, pushing himself harder constantly, and yet he seemed to always have time to invite her and the rest of their close friends join him in training and such. She really had no idea how he was doing it, focusing so intensely on school while maintaining an active social life. Maybe he just doesn't sleep. She thought it mostly is a joke, but she wouldn't be surprised if it was true. It wasn't like she didn't like this new attention she was getting from him. On the contrary, she truly enjoyed it, but of all the people she was feeling socially exhausted from, it was him, which was frustrating because she used to be able to feel incredibly comfortable just spending time talking with him. If only she could get a grip and just have fun with him, but it was different from before, different from what she'd become accustomed to. He was different now in the way he treated her. Before, it had been easier to stamp down these emotions, but now, much to her dismay, she wasn't the only one to notice those differences. With the shared stories of each of the group's adventures during the wilderness survival training, and the knowledge that her group had been separated, Mina and the other more interested classmates put together that she and Izuku were alone for most of the time. A blush flooded Ochako's face. She clenched her eyes shut, smacking her cheeks as she shook the memories away. As much as Mina and Toru both begged for details on that, Ochako refused to give in, telling of the other occurrences that had happened to them. Details on sleeping arrangements were irrelevant. But boy, have they been persistent, especially Mina. Always knowing glints in her eyes, prodding, poking as she did everything in her power to get her to speak. Which she would not. At least, not to her or the other girls. Not yet. The construction site was large, scaffolding encased the frame of what looked like would be a 2 or 3 story building. She smiled, picking up her pace as she pushed the gate open and squeezed in, ignoring the "no trespassing" sign. The sounds of machinery and scraping with American rock music playing in the background was such a familiar sound she couldn't help but smile wider. She was practically skipping, avoiding the potholes in the dirt filled with muddy water. "Hey kid, what are you?" she heard someone start to shout at her. Ochako looked up and grinned as happy excitement spread across his face. "Ochako. Hi Bruce, how's it going?" Bruce smirked, giving her a big bear hug. "It's fine. Gosh kiddo, it's been too long. Hey everyone. Ochako's here." In no time at all, she was surrounded by the men she'd grown up with, giving her rib-crunching hugs and mussing her hair. Since it was a small business her father ran, he kept on only a handful of employees. They'd all be together for years, making a smooth and efficient team of builders. They'd been basically uncles to Ochako ever since she was small. "What are you doing here, Chaco?" "I got a short class day, and I wanted to talk to my daddy," she said, feeling so much more at ease than she had been for a while. Kenichi went off-site to pick up a few things, but he should be back anytime now, Haruto replied. "Or right now," Ochako heard her father say from behind her. She turned to see him holding a grocery bag in one hand, and a box of pastries in the other. She smiled brightly and didn't even wait for him to put his things down before jumping forward and wrapping her arms around him. "Ochako!" he exclaimed. "It's so good to see you, Daddy." "It's good to see you too, sweetie." Ochako swung her legs as she ate the cream-filled pastry her father had bought. The hard hat he'd placed on her head was a little too big for her, but safety first she supposed. She'd forgotten how much fun it was sitting up in the bare bones of a building chatting with her dad. Much to her mother's dismay, it was one of her fondest memories from childhood. And then it went flying everywhere. I mean everywhere. Kenichi continued, his arms stretched out to gesticulate the story. You should have been there. Ochako laughed, spitting with amusement. Not sure I wanna. Yeah, the mess did take a bit to clean. I blame Bruce. You always blame Bruce, she replied, swallowing a bite. It's usually his fault though. True. Kenichi smirked, then patted her head against the hard hat. So, what did you come all this way to talk to me about, kiddo? She gulped, nearly choking on her food at the sudden conversation turn. What makes you think I came out here for something specific? Can't I just hang out with my daddy? Quote dot. A disbelieving smile crossed his features. I can tell when my own daughter's got something on her mind. So spit it out. Ochako sighed, swallowing her last bite as her swinging legs slowed. Well, it's kinda awkward to talk about. So not about your hero work, he prompted. No, she replied. It's about a boy in my class. Kenichi raised a brow. Oh. Her face turned bright red. I sorta like him a lot. She got out quietly, tugging on her hair as she glanced up at her dad's beaming face. My little girl's growing up so fast, he laughed, patting her back heftily. So which one is it? What's he like? Ochako smiled, despite herself. Izuku Midoriya, the boy I told you about after the entrance exam. Kenichi blinked as a realization dawned on him. The one who broke all his fingers at the sports festival. She winced. Yeah, that's him. Well, sweetheart, I'm not gonna question your tastes or anything, but I think that one's got a few screws loose. She snorted. He's not crazy, Dad. I swear. He was just still figuring out his quirk back then. Ochako said, feeling the need to defend him. Izuku was far from crazy. Determined and sometimes reckless, yes. But definitely not crazy. What do you mean? Ochako shrugged. Deka Midoriya told me that his quirk manifested kinda later than usual, so he was still getting used to using it. He's gotten a lot better about not hurting himself like that anymore. Well, I guess that's good, Kenichi replied, still looking confused. What age did her get it then? 14's what he told me. Everyone thought he was quirkless before, the suddenly bam. Got crazy strength and stuff. For a moment, it looked like Kenichi's eyes were gonna bug out. How in the hell does that happen? I guess it's pretty rare, she replied with another shrug. Unheard of, I'd say, he exclaimed. You started floating junk around when you were 3. Ochako laughed. It was pretty weird, but she supposed not impossible.
Me is fucking gay. Zachary is fucking gay. Zachary is fucking gay. Oh, yeah.
Impossible. Though quirks were irreversibly integrated into their society, she supposed that didn't mean they knew everything there was to know about them. There were countless scientists researching quirks, where they came from at a genetic level, how they manifest differently, depending on the person, etc. Izuku would probably make a pretty good lab rat for them with his unique situation, but she highly doubted he'd be comfortable with that. Her dad shook his head. That's just really weird. Yeah, but he's working hard to make it an advantage. I'd say he's one of the strongest in our class, Ochako said fondly, feeling proud. Kenichi looked at her with a smile. So, you really like this boy, huh? She flushed, remembering the beginning of this conversation. Why, yeah, I do. How long? She looked down to her lap. Since last year. He let out an offended scoff. And, you didn't tell me, till now. She stuttered, waving her hands in front of her. For a long time I didn't wanna even admit it to myself, Dad. I seriously wanna focus on school. And you're tellin' me all this now because, he prompted. Prompted. He prompt. She sent a defeated look at him as her shoulders slumped. I didn't wanna accept it, really. I don't know what to do though, Dad. It's gotten really distracting, and we're both trying to do our best to become heroes, and I don't wanna get in the way of that. As much as I try to think myself out of it, it won't go away. I feel so flustered around him sometimes, especially lately, and he's just trying to be my friend and stuff. I mean, he'd one of my best friend, you know. I don't wanna mess anything up. That was a lot more than I meant to say. Ochako swallowed, gripping her skirt nervously. Kenichi was quiet for a moment before putting a hand on her back, sliding closer to tuck her into a side hug. I'm sure you're not messin' anything up, sweetie. She shrugged. Feels like it. Lately he's been wanting to do more together with me and our friends, and I just get all stupid. But he wasn't like that before the survival training, and now he's just making it so much harder. He patted her back. Do you know how he feels? Suddenly it felt like her stomach had launched itself into her throat. No way, no way does he like me back. Hell no, believing that was just projecting her own desires onto him, and that was just wrong. He just thinks of me as a friend. I mean, he treats me like anyone else he's friends with. There's nothing more there. But to know for sure, she'd have to ask him. Ask him. Ask him if he likes me. But if I did that, I'd need a reason to do so. And that reason is I like him too. Simply unthinkable. That is not happening. And then would come the awkward and unknown changes to their relationship, and she just couldn't do that. I don't wanna. Why? She gawked at him like he'd grown a second head. 'Cause it could ruin our friendship. I don't wanna lose that, ya know. I understand, Ochako, he nodded, tightening his hug a bit. I know how that feels. Ochako looked down again, listening. Quote dot. Me and your mom were best friends growing up, ya know. Since before we got our quirks. Same neighborhood, schools, and everything. Everything. I can't even say when I started to like her, but by the time we were in high school, it was a lot. But I didn't know at the time she liked me too. Neither of us said anything until we were grown up and going to different colleges. Years later, I got up the guts to ask her out, and she said, finally. He chuckled, patting Ochako's head. Then you got married in college and had me, Ochako added, continuing the story. Yup. And what a gift you've been, he said with a soft smile. As much as I wouldn't take any of it back, I do regret all the time we missed that we could have been together for. Neither of us had the courage to take that leap. Ochako swallowed again, and for a moment allowed her mind to wander over the possibilities and, what if, potentials she tended to shut out. It was hard to imagine anything happening right now with everything they were working towards. But afterwards, she just didn't know. Quote dot dot dot. I dunno if he likes me back. Would it hurt so bad to ask? Kenichi asked softly. Normally she'd be mortified at such a suggestion, but she simply put aside the worries of hurting their friendship, considered the situation from the outside. What would happen if she did ask? What would he say or do? What would happen from there? If they did become romantic with each other, how would that affect their work? Ochako frowned at the uncertainties. I think, my circumstances are different than yours, Dad, she mumbled quietly. It's not like we have time to pursue that kind of thing, and there's gonna be even less time once we get out of school and establish ourselves as heroes. It takes time and effort on both parts to make a romantic relationship work, right? Those are things that are in short supply for heroes, and I don't want to distract him, or myself. Kenichi sighed. You put so much on yourself, don't ya? He murmured under his breath, so quietly Ochako almost didn't hear it. She bit her lip, but didn't respond. He straightened up and patted her back again. I understand, kiddo. I really do. You wanna follow your dreams, and I'm so proud of you for that. But I don't wanna see you cut yourself off from happinesses in that pursuit. Whether it's with romance, or with other things that would just make you happy or comfortable. There are things in life that are necessary that aren't just work. You gotta take care of yourself too. I know it's hard right now, but do you think you'd be able to find a balance in the future? Ochako let out a soft breath. It was true, she took a lot upon herself, but she had to. This was how she could help and repay her family. She couldn't stop now even if she wanted to. At this point in her life, it felt like she was 2 steps behind and kept tripping, her peers progressing more and more ahead of her, especially Izuku. Her dad was right, it seemed impossible now, finding a balance while she was barely keeping up, but she looked up at the earnest sincerity and worry in her father's eyes. She couldn't help but concede. I'll try, she muttered, wishing it didn't feel like a lie. Kenichi brightened, hugging her once more. There's my girl. Ochako smiled, leaning into him as she felt some of the stress seep away from just being around him. I'm glad I came to talk to you today, Daddy. I'm glad too, he replied, squeezing her tighter. And I'm always here for ya, Ochako. Same goes for your mama. We're both only a phone call or a train ride away. She blinked back, the sting of tears in her eyes as she wrapped her own arms around him, pulling herself deeper into his hug. I know. I know that, Daddy. After a while, he leaned back, patting her back again as she wiped away the stray tears on her face. I do wanna meet him though, Kenichi said after a few minutes. Huh, Ochako blinked. That boy in your class. Midoriya. You should bring him over for dinner sometime. As a friend, ya know. Blood rushed to her cheeks at the mere thought of Izuku being in her house with her parents. It would be so awkward, she could barely stand the thought. No, 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 that is not happening. She exclaimed. Oh come on, you gonna tell me you can't have fun now? I'm sure it'll be fun for you. You just wanna be weird and make him uncomfortable, don't you? Kenichi shook his head, faux offense on his face. I would never. Ochako's eyes narrowed. I'm not sure I believe you. Well then, have a couple of your other friends over too. How's that for a compromise? Bring Suyu again, and those other great kids you've been telling us about. We'll make a feast. She considered that. It would be far better of a situation than just inviting Izuku alone. That would just feel like bringing her boyfriend home to meet her parents for the first time. Which is definitely not what he is. With a group, it would be much easier, and far less weird. Still, she'd only ever brought Suyu home, with her being such a close and comfortable friend. It was painfully obvious the economic class her family stood at, and even though she'd already told Izuku and Iida that, it felt different letting them see firsthand. I dunno, Dad. Kenichi cocked his head to the side. Why's that? I'm just a little embarrassed, she said before thinking. Shame filled her at her own words. Words. Not of you and Mom. It's just, there's some pretty well off kids in my class, and I don't wanna feel like. I dunno. I don't think they'll judge us, but it's still. Still. Kenichi was quiet for a moment as Ochako tugged on her hair with a heavy frown on her face. It's hard letting weakness be exposed, isn't it? Ochako blinked, then nodded. Yeah, that sounds about right. Ochako, Kenichi said, his voice solemn. Our lack isn't a weakness, or a flaw to be hidden or embarrassed by, it's what's made our family strong. What's made you strong? Be proud of where you come from. Your mama and I aren't ashamed, and you shouldn't be either. That strength has always gotten us through the day, no matter what. Her heart clenched at his words. She looked up at him with a smile, biting her lip to keep it from quivering. You worry too much, kiddo. Kenichi let out a small laugh. I know, Daddy, she said softly, leaning her head against his shoulder. No matter what, I know you'll be a kind and caring hero. That's just who you are, Ochako. She shut her eyes to keep them from swimming. Thanks, Dad. They sat like that for a while, watching the city move below them as the spring sunshine shone down, warming the air despite the cool breeze. Ochako kept her eyes closed, taking in the moment and letting herself relax. She could always relax with her father, no matter what. He just had that sort of presence about him that made every problem that was too big and unmanageable seem small and easier to bear. It made her wish she was still living at home sometimes. So how soon can we have your friends over? Kenichi said coyly after a few minutes of quiet. Pink filled Ochako's cheeks yet again at the thought. I dunno, Dad. It's been so busy, it's hard to find time to get away. Next Sunday? He asked, not missing a beat. Ochako rolled her eyes with a sigh. Maybe. He laughed heartily. I'll let your mom know then. Can't wait. Despite herself, Ochako found herself laughing right along with him. You're such a dork. Where stories live. Discover now.